We are going to hear some interesting analysis on what happens in our region, in Southeastern Europe, some examples of career education, and actually, sorry, what inspired me very much when I first met Mr. Zeloth, it was 2 years ago in Belgrade, was his analysis of career education as, how to say, a cost-effective instrument for our countries that are not investing and don't have the opportunity to invest a lot in their education systems, and at the same time they need to tackle the problems they're facing on their labor markets. And from these inspirations, now we are here, and I think it's really, really
Thank you so much, Lachezar. I think what you said just now is a very important example of how influencing unexpected or unintended effects can be. Because we just came together for another purpose, for a seminar in Serbia, and then this idea was created, I think, by Euroguidance Bulgaria. But first, good morning, everybody, and dear colleagues, let me really also formally congratulate Euroguidance Bulgaria for this excellent and I believe very important initiative, bringing all of us together here on a topic that is really, really needed. Because even, as you know, most probably, those who are dealing also with career guidance and counseling, face-to-face is very important and will remain very important, yeah? Individual, group, and whatsoever. But we should not forget that internet and social media are increasing and are an increasing source also for young people for making choices, for getting information, and so on. But we often forget a third factor, and this is the extremely important role of schools, that schools and educational institutions can play in career guidance, and unfortunately, in many countries, most often are not really fully used to the extent that they should be. And in that context, I think this conference today is very important, and I hope that also I can provide you some interesting and relevant information that helps you further in your thinking. But before I come to my presentation, let me maybe give a second point, a bit of a frame also and footing here for Bulgaria. I'm here only for the second time in Bulgaria. I don't know very well your country, but I had the opportunity to be here 5 years ago as a member of a Netherlands team that had a bilateral cooperation, a peer review on career guidance, Bulgaria and Netherlands. Yeah? And I was member of this expert team here a week, and we analyzed the Bulgarian career guidance system, and I was the rapporteur of that group, and we wrote the report together with some famous professors like Professor Plant from Danish Copenhagen University, and a team also from the Netherlands. Yeah? And let me read one of the 16 recommendations that we made at that time to Bulgaria. I think Euroguidance did not exist at that time, or they were just about to start. Our partner was the National Agency for Vocational Education and Training. And don't be afraid that I read also the rest of my presentation. It's the only sentence that I will read. Yeah? But maybe it sounds interesting in the context of today's conference. It was recommendation number 9. And maybe these recommendations, as well as the paper, is like the Yeti. It was never read or it was never found. Who knows, yeah? But if not, then this conference also of today could help further maybe to revive certain things. And the recommendation reads as follows. At the next stage of curriculum reform in Bulgaria, thought could be given to consider space and introduce or pilot career education in primary and secondary education. In particular, the concept of career self-management skills, this was 5 years ago, could be linked with other key competencies in the curriculum, as well as with entrepreneurship, education, and learning. Yeah? Does it sound good to you? Well, we should ask, I think, the young people, because I also liked very much the start of this conference, which I didn't know. It was hugely inspirational, And it also showed, I think, that Bulgaria is unique, maybe in the art of, how to say, not only music, but also expressing yourself through fine art. It was really great, and it showed that young people should be much, much, much more heard. And maybe if the young people after this conference say, yes, we need career education, then it was a success of that conference then, yeah. So, but now let me start more officially with that what I have prepared. I will provide you a bit of an overview on the rediscovery of career guidance, some delivery models, but also Professor Watts will go into that. Then say about the advantages and disadvantages of career education, and then provide some examples from the EU, but first also from the neighboring countries here in the region. Then, first of all, rediscovery of career guidance. I think it is not only a trend, as it was said by Raimo Vuorin in the European Union, but it is also in the neighboring countries of the European Union a trend. For example, and I have written a publication some 2 years ago, In Demand, it's free of charge, downloadable from the internet, from our organization. For example, in Egypt, in Jordan, in Lebanon, Syria, but particularly also Serbia, I want to highlight, because Serbia has approved by government last year a strategy and an action plan that is really good stuff and maybe inspirational for a number of other countries, but also Montenegro, Albania, Kosovo, according to the United Security Council Resolution 244, but also in other parts of Eastern Europe like Ukraine, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan even, can you imagine? Yeah? So there is a real trend of a kind of rediscovery of career guidance, and I have done here a preliminary mapping that maybe is not 100% perfect yet, but it shows an important trend that most of the countries that are neighboring to the European Union, they have a clear upward trend in the career guidance policy and also in piloting important projects. You see the countries that I mentioned before and some others. Some countries have an upward but a bit stagnating trend. This is a classification I did myself. And some countries, or very few, I identified only Bosnia-Herzegovina has a stagnation or rather downward trend. And we have here a colleague whom I appreciate very much, Haris Huskic from the Public Employment Services. And please don't kill me if you don't agree with this category, but please try to convince me. And then I will change this slide. This was the only country I found doesn't have a clear upward trend, rather maybe stagnating downward. And a couple of countries we still don't know yet. Important ones, like, for example, Kazakhstan or Armenia or Belarus, we have no information, more or less, about that. Yeah? But most of the countries, they show and they go upward because they have introduced either new policy frameworks or about to introduce new policy frameworks, or they are in piloting, making important pilots in career guidance in general, not only in career education. And I'm speaking in general terms now. The level of the policy profile, of course, varies by countries, and there is a certain correlation also by regions. For example, that the region here in the Western Balkans and Southeast Europe is more even ahead of some other regions, and I think this has to do also with the influence of the European Union policies and with the very close neighborhood to the European Union. And there is a trend also, or there are two distinctive features that can be shown. Some countries, and I don't want to name them now, but some countries have more rather a homegrown career guidance development. It means it comes from the countries on its own. Also the tools that are being developed there, they are usually homegrown and self-developed. Others are more donor-driven or donor-dependent, let's say, because they maybe rely more on external funds, and pilots and projects are being done only if there are external funds, which is very important, but which sometimes puts a risk of sustainability of these activities. And then the last point, and I lead now here over to the topic of career education, is that there are different approaches and delivery models. But there is a certain tendency to underutilize the curriculum approach, which is very closely linked to the career education. And I show you now in the next slide an overview of delivery models of career guidance provision as I developed in the publication that I had. 4 basic models. There might be other, and are for sure other taxonomies and classifications, but the ones that I identified in the neighboring countries are the curriculum model, the center model, the individual model, and then a virtual or web-based model. Most pronounced is the individual model in many countries, which means there is a school psychologist, there is a school pedagogue who only to a certain extent does some job, but individually. Yeah. Then a trend is also, many countries use a so-called center model. They believe when we have a center, whatever a center is, sometimes a center has 0 staff. Like, and let me tell an example, in Macedonia, the career centers in the vocational schools, they have no staff. There is only a career coordinator who is not additionally paid, he is a teacher, and the students run the show. They have the center, but the center has no staff. Yeah? Then there are other models of centers that are much more better equipped, usually in public employment services. But many countries believe, yes, if we have a center, then the things will go good, and this is the right way that we tackle career guidance. Yeah? And to a certain extent, it's right. But what is underutilized, and only very recently emerging, according to that what we observe in the EU neighboring countries, is a so-called curriculum model. That career guidance is also being part of a subject, is either a compulsory subject, and there are many, many examples here, and you will hear also in the podium discussion that is later on. There are representatives from Austria, from other countries. They will explain their examples. I'm from Austria, by the way, but I will not speak about the Austria because we have another representative here. But it could be part of a subject, it could be part of an elective subject, it could be an elective subject as such. There are a couple of options that I don't want to go through here in detail, but the observation is this is underutilized. And only recently some examples are emerging, and I will let you know these examples then later on. And also the virtual or web-based model, for example, virtual also in the kind of simple sense, like telephone guidance, yeah, hardly exists. Very few countries, I think, in the world and in the region, I think it doesn't exist. Or online counseling, yeah, that kind of things that don't exist yet, I think, more or less in the neighboring countries. So fully underutilized that kind of models then, yeah. There is no way to say, yes, you have to go for that model and that's better than the other one. I think it's about the mix. And then it's also, of course, about the affordability of that. Can you afford a mix, and which intensity of a mix, or you opt maybe just for one model, as we sometimes observe then, yeah. So this is a kind of a wider frame for career education, and you can imagine that career education is mostly closely linked to the curriculum model, of course, yeah, because that's then the way where it has to take practice. And what also is important maybe, and I don't want to double the information, but a bit, Professor Watts will speak about that a paradigm shift in career guidance has happened. Already, I think, a bit less than a decade. However, this paradigm shift is more happening in the academic community and in the policy-making community, and slowly only reaching in practice. It's much less in practice. And it also influences the EU neighboring countries, this paradigm shift. It has started in the OECD countries, of course, yeah, in the Anglo-Saxon countries, yeah. But gradually this paradigm shift is widening, and here are 4 points that I identified. The one was already mentioned by Raimo, that the lifelong perspective, so we speak about lifelong guidance and not only about guidance at certain points or for certain groups. The second one, and this is a very important one, what I invented this term, and then later on it entered even a commission communication on vocational education a few years ago. I introduced this wordplay from psychological testing to tasting the world of work. It means that psychological testing is a bit out. Doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done anymore, yeah, but it's a bit out. And the new way in means experiencing, exploring the world of work, getting experiences, concrete experiences, and so on. And, yeah, so there is a shift. And the third one is a bit less relying on an external expert and more developing your inner capabilities and career self-management skills, which does not mean you don't need any more an expert, but shifting a little bit balance. And then the fourth one that I see in this paradigm is from individual to group and self-help approaches also. Self-help approach is also very important. And of course, they are very much linked to career self-management skills. This is a bit, again, the context and the frame of career education. And Professor Watts will speak, I think, more in detail on some of these aspects. Then let me turn now to the next chapter that I thought might be interesting for you, and that relates a little bit to the overall topic, because the topic is a cost-effective and cost-efficient solution. Yeah? And when I was reviewing a bit the research, I did not come across any significant research that, for example, would say, yes, career education is more, has better impact or is more cost-effective or cost-efficient than other ways. There is some research of that. For example, Canadian research said if mandatory courses are being introduced in schools, this is a much more cost-efficient way of delivery than group or other kind of individual counseling. Yeah? And this is obvious. It's obvious to a certain extent. Yeah? And you will see also some of the reasons. But first, as I said, like the curriculum model, and the curriculum model is the way of implementation, is underutilized, career education is often marginalized. Yeah? And despite that there are very good arguments, I would say, not evidence. Yeah? Evidence may be something at the court, and even here it's sometimes questionable. Then, yeah? But there are very good arguments and common sense that would say, yes, career education is really something good. Yeah? And there are many reasons why it then doesn't work, and we need to think about that reasons. Yeah? But at least, let me say, career education can have a triple role. I tried to identify 3 very important roles. It has more, yeah? But in my opinion, it has these 3 important roles. And the first one is it can increase the access to career guidance significantly. Significantly, because it is not only covering a few individuals, depending on how it's implemented, of course, but it can cover entire generations of students in schools and other educational settings, and it can be also included as modules in training of the unemployed, as a kind of career education to be seen as that. The second one is, I think, the developmental, the experimental, and the process dimension, which means that career education, maybe unlike traditional career guidance that you get once, that you get twice, is a continuum, and a continuum over time, and a process. And as we know from all education, therefore we have education 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, 12 years, yeah, only this allows to learn. It doesn't guarantee to learn. As many learning in the school doesn't guarantee that you really learn. Think about it, yeah. But it is not limited to isolated single-off interventions, yeah. And this developmental, this process dimension, this experimental dimension, yeah, is something very important. It's very important, and maybe it hasn't yet, it is not in the forefront, or it is maybe a good argument that you can use towards your institutions and also policymakers why it should be introduced. The third one is, and we come back again to these career management skills, is the empowerment role for the individual. In the individual session, okay, also the student or the young or whoever can be empowered, yeah, but through career management skills, as it was outlined before, and through this process dimension, the individual can be really empowered and more empowered to manage various complicated transitions in education, in the whole life, and to become or to remain employable throughout their life. So these are, in my opinion, 3 very important roles that career education can have and that speak for career education. And if you now look a bit to the 4 priority areas that Raimo Vuorinen outlined before from the Council resolution from the European Union, then you see a very close affiliation, of course, to career management skills and then to access. So these are the 2 major dimensions that would be covered by career education. And here a few arguments that maybe some evaluation or some research that is quite limited in my opinion on the specific topic of career education. There is quite a lot of research on career guidance in general then, yeah. But also this research says that usually the findings can be more linked to soft outcomes and not to hard outcomes for career guidance. Soft outcomes in the sense of better decision-making capacities, enhanced self-awareness, and that kind of things. There is clear research results then, yeah. But in general, there is some evaluations, let's say, would confirm that career education tends to be less expensive, and I tell you later on a bit more a concrete example on one pilot that was introduced in one of the countries. Secondly, it can be more cost efficient through covering a larger number of population, of course, then, yeah. It tends to motivate better. For example, students very frequently like this subject, yeah. How many subjects students like in the school, do you know? But I came across very often career education is very much liked by students then, yeah, or sessions if it's not subjects, yeah. And it can achieve long-lasting effects. Through the learning developmental perspective, something in the behavior can be changed, not something in a short attitude, but something in the long-term behavior that also is not very, very well researched, yeah. But we believe that these some very important things. However, there are important challenges and critical issues for career education. And I did not mention here one, and one is all of those who deal with education and with curriculum might know how difficult it is, something to introduce newly and innovate in the curriculum. Because everything is traditional and everybody wants to defend his areas that are already here, and it is extremely difficult to introduce something. Therefore, we recommended before to Bulgaria, we said, if you have a new curriculum reform, you remember, the sentence was very well reflected that we had 5 years ago. So it's very difficult, and there's very competing interests, and you will face many resistance from many people, open and hidden resistance if you want to introduce something in the curriculum. It's not an easy job, yeah? But if you manage, even then, there are quite a number of challenges, because teachers tend to prepare students for exam. They are judged by that, and this is a very common feature. It's not always about learning. Students and teachers might give less importance to career education. Usually it doesn't attract credits, yeah? Or there are no marks on that very often. Yeah? A careers component might depend on the goodwill and the energy of a teacher. Yeah? So it's a huge variety in the quality also. And training or retraining of teachers is often not sufficient. That's what we observed in career education. And the need to acquire competencies for career education needs to be already in initial teacher education. Yeah? It's not enough usually if you just get retrained. Yeah? So it's a longer term effort also. And maybe the last pay, teachers pay. Because sometimes there are examples where teachers don't get an extra pay or don't get a pay at all. It's just an honorary function to be a career coordinator in the school. Usually this does not work then. Yeah? This works for a few, but this doesn't work as a system then. Yeah? Now, let me go to some examples, and to start first with examples from EU neighboring countries. And the first one that I want to mention is an approach where there is an integrated curriculum approach. You have seen first these models from the curriculum, and there was also a model that maybe I haven't mentioned, integrated approach in the curriculum, yeah, in few subjects or in all subjects maybe. Also here, variations are possible. Yeah? And Turkey has introduced a few years ago a so-called guidance-oriented curriculum, a holistic developmental perspective, and they defined 7 competence areas in the guidance program, and one of these areas are academic and career guidance, or orientation to the school environment is the second one out of these 7. Then, yeah? And in addition, they have introduced a special orientation and guidance class in the 9th grade, because here they have to make the decision on vocational and general upper secondary education. And delivered is the whole thing by guidance practitioners who have a coordination and consultation role, but the real delivery agent is the classroom teacher. So the cooperation between guidance practitioner in the school and classroom teacher is extremely important. And in total, Turkey has about 17,000 guidance practitioners in the country. Can you imagine? This is a huge army, even if you would compare maybe to others. Of course, Turkey is a big country like Germany, but it's a huge number. And there's really limited, almost no impact research available done on this guidance-oriented curriculum. Yeah? I've really checked it also with experts from Turkey, and we have one representative here also from Turkey. Please correct me if something was wrong. There's a recent master thesis exploring some variables of effectiveness that say, yes, it is effective and measuring by certain variables. Then, yeah? But there's a really, really very limited research on that. Yeah? It's a recent initiative. Then let me mention an example from Kosovo, which I also analyzed a couple of years ago. And we have representatives from Kosovo also here who may then add something in the discussions or if you have further questions. And what is remarkable here is it is something funded by the European Union, we have to say then. Yeah? It was a project that started to be implemented in 2007-8 as an elective subject. So another model, elective subject, not integrated in the curriculum, not compulsory subject, elective subject, and only in the 9th grade. Also because here it's an important transition year. And there are 16 hours per year, so it's only half a year in 34 pilot schools, and the decision was made by the government to expand the pilots. And I'm not very much updated on the number of schools, but they were expanded already. So it's something that is going up. Monitoring and evaluation shows, here there are some EU monitoring reports, shows that the students and the teachers are hugely dedicated and enthusiastic about the new subject. Yeah. Secondly, it triggered off further interest in career education by other classes in the same schools. They said, we want also to have career education. Yeah? Like I said before, young people, we want career education, for example. Yeah? Many teachers, some directors wish to have it as compulsory subject even. As elective subject, it bears some risk to get crowded out, yeah? Because there are sometimes some internal plays that are being played, and then other subjects are being proposed as elective subjects, but maybe not career education might be proposed as, depending on the director, depending on some other issues. And here I have made a small calculation myself a couple of years ago in Kosovo. It is a cost-efficient solution because a rough calculation that just is based on the teacher's pay, which is a very low pay there, for the lessons to be delivered, would mean, and in the average classes that they have, there is not much more than €2 per student to spend per year for career education. Yeah? So please tell this to every policymaker, don't you have €2 per student just to introduce career education then, yeah? And all the other things and all the other subjects are the world and most important, and something looking for the life and for the future of the young people is not important for €2. Yeah? It doesn't include materials and other costs. They were paid by the project. Yeah? As elective subject in Kosovo, it even costed 0. Why? Because the elective subject was already there. Just another subject went out, and career education came in, and at the end it was 0 cost. Yeah? And the curriculum framework for career education was developed for grades 6 to 13, but I think this is still under discussion and not yet approved. Other examples from the region, and I hope there is still some time to mention briefly also some international ones, is Albania. Albania recently has introduced a compulsory subject. So you see another model. A compulsory subject called Career Education Edukimi per Karieren in the core curriculum of gymnasia and vocational schools, very recently, just now, in the 11th and in the 12th grades, and the syllabus has 54 hours, and again, also here, 36 for career and for entrepreneurship. So it's combined with entrepreneurship, and it's delivered by social science and economics teachers, and there are a lot of problems because the teachers are not really prepared. And the ministry made guidelines for the teachers and guidebooks, but things are really, really not easy, I think, at this initial stage, and it is very recent. Montenegro is planning to strengthen guidance as part of education in an EU project, and touching upon school work plans, redefining the role of psychologists, pedagogues, and trying to find ways to integrate in the curriculum. I don't know if there are already concrete proposals there, but this is part of the project that Montenegro is doing, also an EU project. And Ukraine has already for some time labor lessons, and also class teacher hours are sometimes used for guidance. If there was some time, please let me show also a couple of EU and international examples, and there are many more, and there are plenty more, and I on purpose did not select some examples that maybe might be presented anyway by the podium discussion then later on from the representatives of their country. But Finland, I think, is a leading example anyway, because also they have such a long tradition for 20, 30 years and more with career education, one of the first countries, and both in primary and in secondary and in vocational education. And there is a specific time allocation for that, like lessons 2.5 hours in certain grades, and it varies then throughout the different pathways. And there are also curriculum guidelines that specify many issues, and one of the issues is that every school must produce a plan how career education and guidance is reached, and also parents must have the opportunity to be involved. This is also very important. It's obligatory that parents are being involved. Another example where we had just a study visit with a group of high-level policymakers from Serbia is Estonia. They have it already included in the national curriculum for 15 years, you see, 1996, but since then there were many curriculum reforms, and the latest curriculum reform was just recently, and the new topic called here is lifelong learning and career planning. And it is both an integrated principle and an elective subject, which takes place at certain stages of basic school and in upper secondary education, usually in the last 2 years. and it has 35 lessons. And a detailed syllabus is set by the national curriculum, and I have, if you want, I have 30, 40 pages of this national syllabus for basic and for secondary education in Estonia I have with me, because we got it when we were there on the study visit. If someone wants to copy or wants to have a look on the syllabus, you can have it. And the content of learning, well, is typically is knowledge oneself, it's career planning, it's career information, and decision making and planning. It's the usual topics that are involved in career education. In Scotland, schools are key deliverers of guidance, and they have, since a few years, Curriculum for Excellence, it's called. And in this Curriculum for Excellence, they have skills for learning, skills for life, and skills for work. And also here, personal learning, planning, and career management skills explicitly are introduced. And in Scotland, they pay a lot of attention to the world of work and making connection to go to enterprises, to have some placements there, and to have a real strong connection to the world of work. This is something very special for Scotland. New Zealand, I just came across recently at the conference in South Africa on career guidance that they have also introduced now career management competencies for young people in the 21st century. And previously, the career advisors in the schools were just coordinating some career activities, but now the new model is with the career management competencies that these advisors work together with subject teachers. And in addition, do that what they did in the past, of course, yeah, but the new dimension came in, that something is done in the curriculum and that they strongly network and cooperate with the subject teacher. This is very new in New Zealand, but they have a bit fragmented, or as you wish, a toolbox approach. They have learning programs, and I don't go through all of them, information and guidance, also one-to-one, and lots of activities and events, yeah. So it's an approach where career education plus career guidance, classical one, and additional activities are combined then, yeah. And the last two examples are Singapore. Singapore also because it is maybe one of the very good examples in the world and started very early, also some 30 years ago. And they decided from the beginning to introduce more a model based on career education than on career counseling. And their philosophy is to focus in primary schools on career awareness, in secondary schools on career exploration, and in upper secondary schools on career planning. And it's also delivered through a variety of means, then, including lessons and career education. And Canada is also one of the leading examples in the world, I think, in career guidance in general. And they have not only some provinces, despite that Canada is very different, every province does things differently than the other one, but some provinces have developed the concept of guidance-oriented school, and Canada also is very famous of having developed some creative career education resources, and the most famous is the so-called The Real Game, which was applied in the UK and many other countries, Turkey or others even, quite successfully and adapted, and so it's worthwhile to look also at Canada and of course many other countries. And I hope I'm at the end of my presentation now, and I hope that you can make career education work, but you will need 3 ingredients, key ingredients, and you will need all of them, and you shouldn't miss out one of them, because then something is very missing at the end of the menu. It's passion, it's vision and action. And if you have vision and action but no passion, you know, you will be always just mediocre, and the result is not very famous, yeah, and will be not noticeable maybe. If you have passion and action but no vision, then you will reach the wrong goal. So it's important to reflect your vision. Yeah? But, and this probably is important for many of our countries here in that room, if you have passion and vision, and usually we have it, yeah, but no action, then you will be daydreaming, yeah. So I hope it was useful for you to learn more about career education, to get a bit of an understanding what is this strange animal about, before Professor Watts will go into more details also for that issue. And I thank you for your attention, and for further information you can always contact me. You're welcome, and I wish you good luck and all the best for the implementation of your activities in your countries. Thank you so much.